Yes, we're live now, and we're here with Bradley, Jeff.
Is that a question?
No, I'm just telling the audience, we're here with Bradley in case they can't read that little box down there because they might be on a mobile device. We're here with Bradley, we're here with Jeff the Blue Head, and we're here with Ben on crap webcam. And then
did you say blue hair?
I said blue head.
Oh, and see on mine it's green, so there you go.
Oh, that's
already there's sensor intuitive differences.
Yes, Bradley, come on.
Dot form differences.
Yeah, I think you're trolling me there. Come on, that's got to be blue, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to me it's blue, so I think it's a platform difference.
No, we covered this before. It really does show up a different color on mine. It's a green circle rather than a blue head.
Right. Okay. Anyway, we're going to talk about the program, folks. We're not going to be boring techies. Right. So this episode, what's it called, Jeff?
All right. We left off at season 7, episode 11, Bones of Contention, which originally aired January 15th, 1999. It was written by Eric Overmyer, Jason Yoshimura, and directed by Brad Anderson. And I'll read a brief recap, and then we can share any thoughts.
I'll just when Jeff says left off at, like we left off at the episode before this, so this is the first one of this.
Well, right, we covered the first 10 episodes of the season,
and this is number 11.
So we actually have a little bit more in this half, but still, we'll get through it. So Bunch and Lewis investigate a set of female skeletal remains dug up at a construction site. Their investigation reveals that the woman was part of a gang of bank robbers active in the 1980s. And interviews with the 2 surviving members result in criminal charges against them both for her death. After G warns Falzone that he or Ballard will have to transfer to the other shift if their relationship is serious, they decide to keep seeing each other in secret. Shepard returns to work but is put on desk duty, greatly frustrating her, and Lewis gives her a souvenir, the bullet-nicked hat that he was wearing on the night she was beat. So, I'll open up the floor to whoever wants to share thoughts on that.
It wasn't just bullet; it was like an actual hole in the hat. So yeah, I would have been annoyed as well if I were Lewis. But yeah, I liked all that storyline about Lewis and getting in the shot and all that kind of, because it gave it a bit of a continuing theme to it. I thought he played it well. That actor, the one in the prison. There. Do you remember anything about this episode, Bradley?
Not very much. I remember the whole thing about. Is this the episode where they're talking about like correctional?
Yeah.
Like being penitent versus like correctional. To where I thought that was sort of interesting commentary on sort of like changing the task that was being given to about the whole concept of rehabilitation is that they're no longer sorry, they're just being corrected. Well, it's like they're no longer serving penance, they're just being corrected and then sent back into society without being sorry about it.
Is that what Munch said? Who said that?
I'm not even sure what was in this episode, but it was a 3-person dialogue. I think I remember Stivers was there.
She didn't get much to do this series, did she, Stivers?
I haven't seen her do anything besides. I think at one point we talked about all she's doing is like being involved in other people's affairs and never as much doing anything of her own.
Just giving her really good advice and telling Falzone, yes, she likes you. Open your eyes. Ballard likes you.
Yes, yeah, so apparently that's. I haven't seen her do much of anything else. So.
Oh yes,
we can talk about the Stivers character later on.
And the only thing is like the kind of advice that goes. I mean, I thought at one point that that Falzone most resembled an SFP, but then I was realizing those things a little bit insensitive and maybe more towards STP. But
yeah, I'm surprised. I never for a second thought that he was anything but an ISTP.
Well, I saw him right at the start when they tried to make him look better with his family and stuff and show more of his feeling side. Anyhow, so.
But I made the point at some point that
Oh no, we've lost Jeff.
You're cutting in and out, Jeff.
Of the
Oh there.
deeply personal feel that he stumbled in.
Yeah, we
Alright.
can't. We
Yeah,
can't.
we couldn't make out any of that really. So I'm not sure exactly
Maybe-
what problem you're having.
If unless the weather's bad outside, you might need to reload your device. Yes, because where Jeff is, folks, whenever there's bad weather, it tends to affect his internet access. So, Bradley, what are your thoughts? You could give your overall thoughts on the. It's not really the time, but we might as well. We've got to adapt. Give your overall thoughts on the season, please. And then when we've gone through the other episode, then you can sort of do it again.
You want me to talk about the season or the
Yeah,
episode?
because it was. You could almost say your overall thoughts on the season, like sort of like what you've remembered of it, and then how that, and then at the end you can say what your overall thoughts are based on these things that we're just going to show you, because then it might be an idea of the difference between what you've remembered, the things that were most memorable, and then see if there's a difference. We've got to fill time while Jeff comes back.
Yeah, but I think you're asking me to talk about sort of remember 23 or something episodes.
Yeah. I mean, it's what can you remember?
I mean,
you're back.
You're back. All right.
I didn't go anywhere.
Oh, what happened?
You tell me.
You sound went a bit sort of like when it was slow.
On my end, that was you.
Oh. Was Bradley like that as well?
Yeah, both of you. So I couldn't understand what most of you were saying, and until you said the thing about Falzone. So I just replied to that, and that's,
Yeah, we didn't hear that. So if you could say that again, Jeff, that would be good.
I don't remember exactly what I said, but something to the effect of that we had discussed his type before when you talked about him showing his feeling side, and I just said that it was closer to Bayless's type of feeling in terms of he kind of was judging people by, like, this is how people are supposed to behave kind of thing, as opposed to like more of the personal feeling like Pemberton and Lewis would express. Did I come through that time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't tell because there was a pause, so I was like, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so I can't remember the other thing I was going to say. Oh, yeah, just as far as this episode goes, seeing the pictures go through reminded me that what I think I liked best about this whole episode was I don't know if ambiguity is the right word, but they left it kind of open as to whether the daughter really knew the whole time. You know what I'm saying? Like about what I don't know how to put it because I don't remember the exact detail. I don't remember the characters' names. But the basically getting benefit.
Well, it's happening again.
Right, while that's happening, I remember the plot.
She shouldn't be able to the things that she's
Right.
He giving her money from it, and they kind of show like maybe she did know about that and maybe she didn't, and they don't really clarify it completely.
I think there was a plot detail. I think maybe it was the granddaughter, the young woman that was talking to Lewis and Munch, and I think they decided not to tell her about either a grandmother or a mother because they were using the money to like pay for her to go through university.
Right. Yeah.
Because I've noticed that because there was that other situation where Munch I don't know. I don't know who was the partner, but Munch decided not to tell the criminal that the old lady had died when he was burglaring the house.
I liked all those aspects of the ambiguity of it, where they didn't necessarily feel the need to answer all of those questions about who knew what.
Oh, and talking of ambiguity, there was that other one where they think that there was a woman surgeon who didn't do her best to save the life of a guy, and they decided not to sort of leave it open and not prosecute the case. One of those.
Well, if it's the one I'm thinking of, they didn't say they weren't going to not prosecute it. They said that they would give the evidence to Danvers and let him decide whether he thought they would make the case.
Oh, but wasn't there one in the previous season where it sort of gave the impression that they did sort of let it slide?
Well, in the sense they did, in that Pemberton was ready to arrest her and Bayless said not to. And Pemberton deferred to him because he was the primary on the case. What Bayless told her was that they would give the evidence that they had to the state's attorney. And so when they got in the car, Pemberton was obviously upset about that, but he didn't contradict him. Like, he didn't say, he didn't go back in and arrest her. He just said, okay, we'll do exactly what you said. We'll present it to Danvers and we'll see what he does.
So was part of the plot point that they could have got extra evidence, but they decided not to get the extra evidence? Well, I think
it was clearly implied in that case that Pemberton thought that there was a racial part of it, that to what the doctor had done. So he was upset about that aspect of it. Even though they had established that the black orderly was also not too broken up about what happened to the guy. So, again, it was another case of Homicide doing a great job of presenting everybody's perspective, where there wasn't anybody acting unrealistically. But anyway, that was back in like season 4 or 5 or something. So,
so as you've seen what we've done there, folks, we can't remember what happened in this episode, so we talked about ones that we didn't remember.
Well, I remember what happened in this episode. I just didn't remember the characters' names because it's been a while. But anyway, I didn't have a whole lot to say about it. I enjoyed the episode overall, and I was just saying that was my favorite part of it, that they didn't feel the need, like some shows do, to have all those questions answered by the end of the episode.
What I'm seeing here from the grabs is the things I probably liked about this were the continuing storyline of, at this point, it was still interesting between Falzone and Ballard, but then it's sort of like it just fizzled away later in the series. Oh, spoiler. And then I did like the stuff about Lewis and the way he was interacting with Shepard. So I did like that storyline of Lewis's mixed feelings about Shepard. So those are the two bits that stay with me. So the arc plot elements.
Bradley, any other thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the episode well enough. I think I didn't see the exact. I didn't see the episode before, so I didn't actually see the the struggle that caused the rest of the arc of the rest of the season of Shepard's.
Yeah, but I sent you that little clip though where Lewis got angry.
Which clip?
I sent you that little clip where Lewis was getting angry and instead of talking about his brim and he threw it. That scene in the hospital.
Oh yeah, but she was he was initially defending Shepard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was sort of defending her in the way of, well, what do you expect a woman to do who's that big? Like, of course she's going to go to a gun and all that. So he was defending her from the point of view of, well, she was a woman in that position. And what sort of came through is that he thinks that a woman of her build shouldn't have been in that position.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so that's like a separate issue from his feelings about Shepard and all that. So, I mean, I didn't see the whole of. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the whole of the episode. I mean, obviously they showed clips from it.
He brought up her weight. Like he said something like, "Oh, she probably only weighs 120 pounds or something like that."
Mm. Yeah, but in the context of this episode, I was I think I mentioned it at the time. Is that I don't like that they left it so open with the message of the hat, because I was thinking, so how is this issue going to be resolved? And the moment I saw the hat, I was like, okay, so it's not going to be resolved. It's just going to hang over everyone's head. So I was very much prepared to. I was very much prepared to like have this be. It's sort of like a weight that's holding the episode down, and as a, I guess, true to my type, true to my feeling preference, it's a type that it's an effect that will weigh on me heavily. The burden of having mixed feelings sort of resonated with me pretty heavily. So I may be a bit more judgmental towards the Lewis character, because I very much hate that sort of passive aggressive style of anger. So
I like though how later in the series he says something. Hey, I nearly got killed. I have no rights to have the feelings about that.
This is episode 13, and that didn't happen until like episode 24. So it was a good 9 episodes of him not addressing that directly until eventually he was challenged on it. And that's when, but he had to wait for someone else to challenge him on it before he was honest about his feelings. So, but in the context of this, in this episode, we didn't get that as soon as I'd like. So, it left a very bad taste in my mouth. Let's put it like that.
One thing about the episode, I've seen there that they were writing it in blue. What was the cold case aspect of this episode?
Well, because the body was dug up from the ground, it was so it was many years old.
Right. Okay. Because I've seen similar things in other episodes with. Was it dug up with a digger, or was that a different episode?
I'm not sure what you mean.
What, a mechanical digger?
Maybe.
Right, because I think there may have been another episode. Oh, I'm all confused. So should we move on to the next one?
The blue thing is basically if it's from a previous year.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So the ratings on this one, Ben and I both gave it an 8, and Bradley gave it a 9 at the time. So.
Considering that I don't remember the episode, I said he rated it very highly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the next one, I would say it was the consensus best episode of the season, because even though there was one I rated higher, the average was the highest for the three of us, because I still like this one a lot. And that was episode 12, called The Same Coin, which was written by David Simon, James Yoshimura, and Sharon Guskin, and directed by Lisa Klolodinko. How do you say that? Called to the scene of a hit-and-run fatality, Munch and Mike are hard put to decide if the death was accidental or deliberate. Gardy recognizes the victim's knife and tattoo as marks of military service in Vietnam, and Munch confirms this after a look at the man's service record. The death turns out to be an accident caused by a teenager joyriding in a stolen car. Munch obtains Gardy's military record as well, sparking curiosity about the other-than-honorable discharge he received. Gardy snaps and tells the whole story. He saw American troops massacring Vietnamese civilians and tried to stop them, only to be ordered off the scene. Meanwhile, Shepard is cleared to return to full duty, but becomes angry at Lewis's reluctance to partner with her.
Well, this might be my favorite episode out of the whole series.
This is definitely my favorite of the season, but I've only seen one season, so yeah. But I enjoyed like that. I thought there wasn't really a dull moment in the whole episode. So,
and I think the actor's very good as well, and I think he played that scene very well in the bar. So it's up there with my favorite episodes. I'd say it's in the top 5, and yeah.
By the way, I still think what we should do once we've seen the movie and we're do like a wrap up of the series we did for Blake 7, but rather than try to rank all the episodes like we did for that, because that would take like 20 hours or something.
Yeah, because the Blake 7 one took about 3.5 hours.
Yeah, but what I think we should do is maybe do a mini countdown of just what our top 10 episodes were, or something like that. Anyway, so what you said just reminded me of that. That was something I thought we could do, because this one might be in my top 10 too. I'm not sure. I'd have to think about it. But anyway,
that requires me to do some homework. Oh dear.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What I agree with what Bradley said about not having a dull moment, and even the like comic relief moments, like the Falzone and Ballard stuff. Like, it was well paced within the episode. Everything fit. There wasn't like things that seemed like they were, out of place. It all seemed like, the characters were realistic as usual. The guest characters, you had the picture of the mother and the kid that wound up being the one. After all these things that they had discussed about the motivation being, somebody trying to get back at the guy for something that happened in Vietnam, like all of these wounds had been opened up, and then in typical Homicide fashion, it ends up being just an accident with somebody who didn't know who the guy was at all, which happens a lot. So it's, again, very different than what I was talking about earlier off air about Law and Order SVU having this heavy-handed approach to things, where we're going to have this long dramatic scene about, where everything is so intense and important, and you have the contrast of the intensity in this episode with that scene with the interrogation of the kid, where the mother is just like, say you're sorry, like he just hit somebody or something, with this, with his fist or something, the level of the difference there and the intensity is like, again, it just hits home how great Homicide was at getting across that, the realism and the perspective of everybody based on what they're witnessing, what they're going through.
And I would put that in the top 10 of Say Your Sorries, the way that actress delivered it. It was just hilarious in the context. So I'll give that actress a lot of comedy points. So what you could do is, like, afterwards you could, like, if you give us the like, say all the ones I gave 9 or 10, I could then look back at those, and then I can that would help me then to put those in order.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was planning to do too with mine. It would be real convenient if the number of episodes I gave a 10 to was a total of 10, but I don't remember exactly how many it is. That would make it real easy if that was the case. But.
Well, I can say that Subway will be in your top 10, but not mine. So,
well, yeah. That's the thing, is I want to do that and rank him, but I'd love to get Bradley's opinion, but he's got so many more episodes to watch, so it would be hard for him to do that. But yeah, I'd love to get his take on that one as well as several other ones. So, because yeah, that was the one, Bradley, we had the biggest difference on. Well, that and the first part of Kellerman PI, we had a pretty strong difference.
Oh yeah.
Too. But it was still not as much as Subway, because that one I gave a 10 and Ben gave it a 2. So if that gives you an idea of how big of a difference we had on that one.
Yeah.
But I will say, not that this in any way makes my opinion superior, because it doesn't. He's entitled to his opinion, but a whole bunch of critics agree with me. So I'll just say that.
Oh, that's fair enough. Just that I wasn't entirely, my heartstrings were not exactly pulled by an annoying ESDP guy dying.
Yeah. What Ben hated the most about that episode is what got the most praise for the episode. Of how they did not do what so many other drama shows would have been, and made this guy like super sympathetic, likable character. They made him as like unlikable as they could, to stress the fact that in the circumstances they had to deal with somebody who was not the most sympathetic of victims. So
now, if the actor was Paul Giamatti, then I would have given it a higher rating.
Well, of course, the actor it actually was. I'm getting so bad with names. I'm going blank on his name, but he was on. He also went on to be one of the stars of a Law and Order series, but a different one. Law and Order: Criminal Intent, I believe, was the title. So anyway,
Anyway, that's all highly subjective.
Yeah, that's going to drive me crazy. I got to look it up really quick what his name is, because when I see it, it'll all come back to me. But Vincent D'Onofrio, yeah.
So Bradley, another thing I remember in this is there was a Munch moment where Munch didn't apologise. He just offered Garty a drink. And that's as big an apology as Munch will be likely to give.
Yeah, and you saw like he was obviously humbled by it, but at the same time he's quicker to move on from something like that. You know, it's like he wanted to kind of shake his hand, buy him the drink, and just be like, "Okay, it's done with it. I'll drop that."
Yeah.
But Gardy was much more of a you open the wound, you can't just close it up again kind of thing.
In fact, that's in Victor Galenko's description of the ENTP. It says that something like remorse will not eat on him for a long time, something like that.
Yeah, well, as opposed to Gardy, I believe best fits an ISFJ, and that's going to be something that will eat on him much more. And he's never going to. He already had a thing, you know, where he had kind of an issue with Munch over previous comments, and so this was kind of like the last straw in his mind. Like he's not coming out of this with more respect for Munch; he's coming out with less.
I'll just read out what Victor wrote here because it actually ends up with a punchline. Disregards the established values and traditions of the group. May feel hurt when this is brought to his attention, but remorse is unlikely to eat on him for long as he is too easily distracted. So too easily distracted from your genuine emotion.
I have something, I guess, of a question for both of you. When Munch mentioned that his friend actually died in the war, and wasn't like he didn't really talk more about it. He just said that he's dead. He died. He did. I forgot. He said his initial story was that he was an objector.
Yeah.
Was it? And he didn't object. Well, he might have objected, but he actually participated in the war and died in it. Is what he said at the end of the story. So
yeah, he basically said they both had planned to not go, and that basically his friend had gone ahead and gone anyway.
I think what they did, I think that, and they actually said, I mean, Jeff has told this story that at the beginning, let's just say that Richard Belzer became a better actor than what he was in the first season, and I think that they could have given him more emotionally expressive storylines later on, because I think at that point he was a better actor. But then again,
I'd agree with that.
But it's almost as if then you might be changing the character though, because like for him to be more emotional.
I certainly would not have wanted them to start doing that on a regular basis. You know, like the SVU type of stuff. I hate to keep bagging on that, but I mean, I wouldn't want it to be like, oh, now we're going to have the Munch emotional breakdown of the week or something. I mean, I wouldn't want to see that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to have him have those moments from time to time, they could have done a little more of that, and it would have been fine. I think in general, they focused a little bit too much in the last couple of seasons on the new characters and not as much on the veteran characters. Even Lewis got a little bit of a short straw for a while. Like They still ended up featuring him quite a bit, but there was even times where I felt like, you know, they could spend less time on Falzone and Ballard and more on Lewis even and Munch.
I mean, I wouldn't mind it if really just cut the show down to Lewis and Munch. Just have that as a series.
Well, that gives me another opportunity to say what I'd love. You know, if they're listening, and I'm sure they are, Tom Fontana and James Yoshimura and all of the Homicide cast. You should get together with me and do Homicide audio stories like Big Finish did with Doctor Who and other stuff. And we can reunite those partnerships and do some great more Homicide stories while the actors are still on this earth.
Yes.
Because I'd love to do that. And you could do some, even with the characters that, you know, that are the characters that aren't with us anymore, but the actors still are. So they could still, you know, we could go back in time, just like the Doctor Who stories have done, or in Blake 7 and all those, and do some more cases from the old days.
And if you are listening to this broadcast, then please disregard what we said about those other characters. We love them all.
No, don't disregard it because it's fair criticism. I haven't said that, as I've repeated many, many times, I still don't think that there is a bad Homicide episode.
Yeah.
Certainly not a bad character overall, although there's, some I liked better than others. But yeah, I can definitely disagree with some of the choices and still think overall everything was quality. So
yeah, and we just put that down to the studio anyway.
Yeah, so I would have no problem even writing, audio stories for, say I was actually given the privilege of doing that and coming up with those. If the only actors who signed on were John Seda and Callie Thorne, I would have no problem doing the Falzone and Ballard show if that was what I had available to me.
Hey, Callie Thorne's good.
Yeah, I could write some stories for them with no question. Yeah, I would love it if, more of the older characters were available. But if that was all there was, I would still take great pleasure in doing that.
I think her character made his character a little bit better.
That's probably true. It certainly gave him a focus that was more, I think at first, when he focused on female character, it was his ex-wife. So it kind of allowed him to move on a little bit.
And she was funny in this episode, like the way she's looking at him eating a peach.
Yeah.
So her... Yeah, this is what I sort of meant when, after this, it's almost as if they told her not to be funny anymore. And
I don't know about that, but I do think she was good at doing that sort of thing. It was good to see those moments in her character.
Yeah, and this is the woman who was hilarious, who said, this woman here. What was the line, Jeff? Tell him you're sorry.
Yeah, she said multiple times, tell him you're sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So should we go on to the next episode, or do you remember anything?
I will say regarding the whole Peach acting thing, I think I don't think they would have told her to be less funny. I think she just saw an opportunity to be funny and she took it.
Okay, good point.
She's naturally funny.
Okay, I'll reframe it. There were fewer opportunities for her to be funny later in the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of that may have just been, plot reasons that it just didn't come up or whatever. You don't know what all the internal workings were with the writers, with the producers, with the network, all that stuff that goes into it. So
I think those opportunities were related to her story about, with the courting with Falzone. And as that that storyline got pushed out, probably those opportunities to be funny got pushed out.
And if they had continued into another season, you might have seen more of where that would go after that, but obviously it didn't. So.
Right.
So as far as the ratings for that one, I gave it a 9, and Ben and Bradley both gave it a 10. So as I said, it was the highest average for the season because it's about a 9.5, between 9.5 and 10 for the average. And then we moved on to the lowest average episode of the season right after that, which is episode 13, entitled Homicide.com. And that was written by Ayelet Selah and Sarah B. Charno and directed by Jay Tobias. And in that one, Shepard and Bayless investigate a woman's ritual stabbing death that was broadcast on the internet. As news spreads of another scheduled performance, Shepard fights to keep control of the case, her first red ball, and her first as primary following her beating, and G pushes her to get results. The killer, Luke Ryland, misdirects the police to carry out his second murder, then hijacks Bayless's personal website for a third one after Shepard baits him into it. After a heated confrontation between Bayless and Shepard, the police arrest Ryland before he can commit this new murder. And it has the note on here, this was a crossover episode with the online spin-off Homicide Second Shift, which was like a picture thing. The internet was not capable of streaming video, at least not very long at that time. So.
Yeah, it was more, in terms of a spin-off, it sort of like rotated about 90 degrees and that was it, because it just died, didn't it?
Anyway, if you want my complete thoughts on why this is the worst or second worst episode of Homicide, but still not bad. I still can't call it bad. I just call it mediocre. Then you can go to the individual review because I had quite a few things to say. But I'll just, in recapping, say that the reason that this was the worst one is that all of the things that are normally present in Homicide, the things that I just praised in the last one, the realism, the consistency of the characters, the good pace, taking all the cop-outs of unrealistic things just to move the plot along. Like all of those elements that normally Homicide is good at, they failed just about all of them at the same time. The only thing I can say is that overall the acting was not bad, and that's probably the only thing that keeps it from being a bad episode, is that I still gave it a 5 because for what they had to work with, the actors still did their best job with the material. There just wasn't much to work with because the script was awful.
Yeah, it was too much of a gimmicky of the internet thing. And
yeah, too much cliches, too much kind of typical. Like it was written by people who didn't know how the internet works. They set aside their usual realism about the way even the FBI works, because they had Mike Giardello basically just being able to snap his fingers and
right.
get everything he needed from the FBI at all times, which they had taken great pains to establish that he didn't have the ability to do that in the previous episodes. So just everything was off.
So it might have been even the even at the time it would have been seemed maybe cliched about the internet, and at the end T's might have been watching saying, I seriously doubt they're getting that frame rate on the video.
Yeah, this is the only episode that really seems dated to me. Like Ben make jokes from time to time about the technology or the computers that were shown in some previous episodes, but there was enough of the episode not being about that it doesn't really distract from it. Whereas in this episode, it was so much the focus of it that it really brings to life that this seems like an outdated episode, because the way they're going about everything just would seem so out of place.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing really to add about this. It's just, I think initially I said, yeah, all the things I liked about the previous Homicide episodes weren't really present, and yeah, they're trying to do something new and didn't do it well enough, something to that effect. So,
I mean, if this series had been on, say 7 years later, say this was about 2006 when YouTube's already out, and they'd have done it, they could have done a crossover series, but the technology wasn't there to actually do it in terms of. And I think Jeff said it was like slightly animated, maybe with slides or something like that. But I think you said you tried to track it down.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure at the time that I did praise the idea of them trying to do something like that. Like I can't fault them for trying to be bold and do something new, try to sort of be cutting edge with something. It's just, unfortunately, they probably just weren't ready for it.
Actually, Doctor Who did a similar thing. I don't know if I mentioned this in the review. They did something a couple of years later.
Yeah, you did mention
and you probably watched them as well. The sort of real-time thing with Colin Baker with the animation. And
I never actually did see it, but I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was a Cyberman story. And then there was one called The Scream of Shauka with Richard E. Grant. And he was a good doctor. They should have kept him on. He was the 9th Doctor. All right. Anyhow, so what should I do? Should I go on to the next episode, Jeff?
Well, if you either of you had anything else to say about this one?
Not really, no.
Okay. In that case, I'll just say that as far as the number ratings, I gave it a 5, Bradley gave it a 6, and Ben gave it a 7. So that's an average of about 6. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what Ben said was good about it, and he didn't really say now, so I'm not sure.
Maybe it's because of the computer stuff, NT points. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess just having that at all, like, I mean, like I said, the acting was still good, like it usually is. Luke Ryland, I mean, the guy who played him was pretty good. I mean, he was convincing as far as that goes.
I think it's more interesting to see old technology than new technology, because if it's like that, we already seen it. And it's like a bit nostalgic as well.
All right, so episode 14 was called A Case of Do or Die, written by Anya Epstein and directed by Tim Van Patten. In this one, which was a bleak episode, but still a better one than the previous one, Bayless and Ballard take the case of a bride-to-be found dead at the bottom of a cliff. None of the evidence conclusively points to homicide, suicide, or an accidental fall, and even the capture of a mugger fails to resolve the case. Ballard admits to Falzone that it has touched a nerve for her because she ran out on her own wedding. Shepard and Mike are called to a movie theater in which one of the customers is found dead in his seat. The man had a habit of yelling out endings to the films. Fed up with this behavior, the manager laced his popcorn with a sedative overdose. G's daughter Therese gives birth to a son. So I'll just say my thoughts real quick on this. I believe I said at the time was I really liked them having a case again where they don't solve it, and that there's multiple possibilities of what could have actually happened, all of which they discussed quite a bit. I thought it was a little bit over the top to have the final scene where Ballard's like at the water talking to the guy. That was a little bit Hollywood, but overall I still, and the kind of black comedy subplot of the guy being killed in the theater. Good casting with Wallace Shawn playing the theater guy, as well as the guy who played the customer. The actor's name was the same, so we don't know whether or not that guy was playing himself and that was really based on a guy who really did that or not. But it seemed like it might have been. So might have been an in joke there.
I think that in real life, in a city such as Baltimore, that guy wouldn't have got out of there alive. Like he would, or at least been beaten up on a number of occasions.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. But and it may have been somewhat based on a true story, like I said. So I don't really know what the actual outcome was. But
and I can imagine it wouldn't be just the SPs beating him up; the SJs would be beating him up as well for ruining the endings.
Yeah. But and there was a good. I'm pretty sure this is the one where there was a good scene between G and Mike about where G kind of strings him along, making him think he's going to come down on him about something, and then he was just to tell him about the birth of the baby. So.
There's an example there of an SJ having an SP moment.
Yeah, because he's good at having that serious look, and then he can break it. So, anyway, anybody else have thoughts about this one?
Oh yeah, so I quite enjoyed it. I started putting myself in the position of the theatre owner, again a bit sympathetic for him having this annoying customer. There would have been other ways to have him dealt with.
It was extremely irresponsible to just start upping dosage. It's like, that wasn't enough. Maybe I just add some more. I just keep adding more until something happens, and then something did happen. He died.
No, I think I'd have the guy coerced not to arrive.
I think that's what most people do.
Yeah.
Just have him literally just thrown out.
Yeah, what would have happened? He would have been beaten up. He would have been seriously threatened by the people who were annoyed. Yeah, like I said, it's in Baltimore, so. Right, so should I go on to the next? So, Buddy, have you got anything to say about this?
No, I mean, I think I remember saying that I enjoyed the sort of the non-progression of the episode. Like, it didn't really. I mean, it didn't have much to begin with, and then it progressed, and it didn't really get much more. And then they just say, "Okay, we can't do this." I think I enjoyed that aspect of it, and I enjoyed the more humorous B plot as well. So I was entertained by the episode. Is a good way to say.
And as we always say with Homicide, the acting was good, and the casting was good of those the two guys.
I may have said that the acting was one of the things I didn't like, but of the guest actors, I think I might have said that I didn't enjoy it as much, but
it was a little bit flat. I thought, not bad, just there wasn't a whole lot of compelling stuff from them. So I guess the sister I thought was a little bit better than the boyfriend or fiance.
I mean, I'm comparing this to acting in Britain, because acting in Britain is, and especially in the soaps, is not good. It is. So
this one was real easy. We all gave it a 7, so an average of 7. So then we moved on to the third and final crossover episode. So we actually reviewed them separately. So I don't know if Ben has the pictures separate, but anyway. The Law and Order episode. They were both titled Sideshow.
Do you want me to show the Law and Order episode?
If you got the pictures handy, sure.
Right, because this is the one for the Homicide half of it. So
I was going to read the description of what happened in the Law and Order thing first, and then
right, okay, I'll put that up. I'll just
I mean, we can kind of talk about them together. But
okay, I'll go and I'll find it then. I'll find the.
all right. So on the Law and Order side, okay. First of all, it was written by Renee Balser and directed by Ed Sheeran. And when Briscoe and Curtis discover that a high-level federal official found murdered in Battery Park was recently transferred from Baltimore, they team up with Baltimore homicide detectives. The joint investigation reveals that the victim was involved in an affair with another high-level government official whose career will be destroyed if the relationship becomes public. The independent counsel summons McCoy and his Baltimore counterpart Ed Danvers to Washington and demands that McCoy reveal his source or be jailed for contempt. Briscoe and Curtis apprehend the suspect, but the FBI claims jurisdiction and the suspect evades trial, if not justice. And on the homicide side of things, it says detectives from Baltimore and New York continue investigating the deaths of both a government official and her killer. They eventually discover that the plot to commit the original murder started with allegations of sexual discrimination within the office of the White House Chief of Staff. However, an independent counsel looking into improper behavior in the White House takes over the case, frustrating Danvers and McCoy in their efforts to prosecute the murders. Meanwhile, Danvers comes up for a judicial appointment, but loses it after details of his juvenile criminal record come to light. G begins to regret allowing Mike to work with the unit after Mike's reports to his FBI superiors helped to derail the prosecution.
Do you remember anything about this episode?
Yes. Well, I mean, I remember it because it was a Law and Order episode, so it's just stuck up more in my mind. But I mean, because it was a Law and Order episode, it was the flow of it was very, very different, and it was very centered around the actual case details, not so much about the character's relationship with the case. There were obviously some this scene where Law and Order detectives are sort of talking to homicide detectives about various things, like the thing about Munch thinking that he had a very rebellious past, and he thought that every federal building has his sort of all federal buildings in the world have like a sort of active case file on him. Every single building he goes into, he thinks, oh, they're going to kick me out for being rebellious and being an upstart in my youth. And the detective forgot. I forgot the Law and Order detective name.
The one played by Benjamin Bratt, Curtis.
No, not that one. The other one. Him.
Briscoe.
Yeah, Briscoe.
But I'll say something about Munch. Munch was a rebel in the NT kind of way, like in the N kind of way of like what he was saying. But from the point of view of the government, he was just this minor guy who wrote a newspaper, but he wasn't actually doing anything illegal in terms of like blowing up buildings like the Weather Underground. Bill Ayers.
So do you relate to that? Being an MTP, do you relate to thinking that
part of it is like part of that's in the. It says it's in the profile in the Enneagram NLP. It says that the sevens just sit there and talk about it, but the NTP kind of ones. What were they talking? No, they were talking about. It wasn't that part of it. It was the part sitting in a cafe and talking about ideas. So obviously they do a lot of things, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, but those actual things that we won't get into could actually land someone with a case file.
Yes,
that they should be concerned about. But Munch didn't quite fit the criteria.
Yeah, because he was writing a paper, but it was a sort of protest paper. But he wasn't involved in the actual violence, like say the Weather Underground, Bill Ayers, and the Weathermen, I think they were called.
Yeah, but I was going to say that, I mean, I thought it was humorous that he actually got the paper. And he felt bad that he wasn't bad enough.
Because it didn't fit up to his image, his self-image.
Yeah. So his ego might have been hurt by that a bit. And I thought that was fun, and the whole
Especially when the fact that his rival Briscoe, or his frenemy Briscoe, and he's the one that found out, because in the previous crossover there was a little bit of rivalry between them because of John's former wife Gwen, and also Briscoe beat him at pool as well.
Oh, I see. Yeah, and then the whole Benjamin Bratt's Curtis, I guess Curtis and Shepard, and the whole interaction there.
That could have been done better. That was a bit. Do you think that could have been done better, Jeff?
What?
The interaction between Shepard and Curtis.
Maybe. I think I said at the time, I just think it would have been better with a different cop from Homicide, that they were trying to feature Shepard again because they thought she was good looking, so that would get more ratings, I guess. But personally, I didn't think that it worked very well. I think I said at the time that it was Curtis's final season on Law and Order, and I think Benjamin Bratt was already like kind of moved on. If you know what I mean, like
his mind had moved on.
He checked out.
His final season, he kind of mailed in a few, and it seemed like one of those. He wasn't really that interested. He was just kind of, which they may have realized at some point, because it didn't seem like they really featured him much in this story. He was just kind of there, as opposed to one of the previous crossovers where he was much more involved in the plot and actually getting the killer to confess and things like that. He was more, at least helping to facilitate it.
I think the big thing about this is certainly when you see this guy there, is seeing the fact that this is one of those episodes which was, I'd always praised Homicide for not being for being honest in their storylines, not being having an agenda and like putting their thumb on the scale of the storyline. Whereas the stuff that had to do with that was very similar to Kenneth Starr did seem to be a bit heavy-handed in the that aspect seemed to be a bit heavy-handed, sort of like an obvious allegory to what was happening at the time.
Yeah, even though I agree with that part, I mean, I agree with the part that it was related to that, but I don't think it was necessarily. I didn't think the agenda part, it was definitely trying to take advantage of that as being a thing in the headlines, but Law and Order always does that. I don't think that it was like one-sided in the sense that they were trying to make him out to be evil and there was no other side to it. In fact, to me, as I said at the time, I think the other side was represented by the fact that they basically were making the case that all of these federal government people were somehow corrupt in some way. So they were kind of justifying his purpose by saying there's all these things going on where people didn't want to be caught doing whatever it is they were doing that was inappropriate.
I like the line from the lesbian woman to Shepard, who says, "Well, aren't you a nice tall glass of lemonade?" Something like that.
Yeah, yeah. That I remember at the time. I thought was, heavy-handed, yes, but not with an agenda. Just the agenda of ratings based on sort of sensationalist kind of thing.
Yeah.
Everything was kind of played up, like the homosexuality angle. I think, at that time, we're talking the late '90s. That kind of story was still kind of, they knew there'd be a little bit of a controversy with that, like on both sides of things. They could tick off both homosexual groups as well as like religious groups that found out about the episode, because they could just kind of, just by putting those elements in there, you could get some response no matter what it was really about. And I think, so at that time, some things kind of smacked of just trying to put that in there to add to the shock value or add to the controversy. And it sort of seemed like that was the case here, that there wasn't really that great a reason for that element to even be present. It was just sort of to do that.
Yeah, whereas these days I would just roll my eyes and say, okay, this storyline might be effective in, say, Saudi Arabia, but, it's not really relevant here.
Yeah, well, at the time, obviously, it still would have been a pretty big scandal if these things had in fact taken place the way they did. But it was a little bit, and anytime you want to switch over to the Homicide pictures, Ben, you can. But,
okay.
I think, it was a little bit like haphazard, disjointed. I don't know, whatever word you want to use. It means that like it was kind of all over the place in the way that, it didn't seem to have the usual, even the Law and Order parts, like they always follow that kind of linear progression. And even Law and Order seemed a little bit out of order than how they normally do things. And definitely Homicide did, in terms of, the usual good pacing was kind of off. It seemed like at certain parts they would take the time to sort of have a scene that, you know, had everything they needed to have in it, and then other times it was like it was rushed. It was like they couldn't make up their mind which way they wanted to go, and so it, you know, it still was not in any way a bad episode, and I gave both parts of it a 7 at the time, so it was still solid and entertaining, but it just, I felt like we had seen better from both shows before, so it was not like a stellar example of either one, but I enjoyed it for what it was. So I'll put it that way, that it wouldn't be what I would hold up as a great example of either show, but that I didn't have a problem with it in any way. It was still entertaining.
I thought the guy looked similar, with the actual Ken Starr.
Yeah, and the one that they had working for Clinton. I don't even know if you got a picture of her, but I finally remembered after saying after a while, the girl she reminded me of Dee Dee Myers was the one from the actual Clinton administration that I thought she was reminiscent of. But anyway, one of the various girls that was having affairs with government officials was pretty cute. I don't remember the character's name, but
Ooh, so it's not just my instinct that comes through, Bradley.
Not this time, but usually it's just yours.
I mean, what do you mean?
Oh, Enneagram instinctual variants. How sexual Essex types are always sort of focused on one-to-one relations of both genders, but particularly the opposite gender. And how Ben is always just think about the one time where he gave an episode 10 because of pictures of breasts.
Well, I would. It would have to be pretty damn compelling for me to actually give extra points to the episode because of it.
I gave it an extra 2 points for the extra 2 points.
She wasn't good enough to do that, but yeah, I doesn't mean I don't notice when someone's cute.
I mean,
right. I mean, there's a difference between you noticing and then Ben.
I went from 8 to 10. It wasn't like I was watching the Subway and I went from 2 to 10. I went from 8 to 10.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the fiance in the Subway wasn't bad looking either.
What did you say?
I said the fiance from the Subway wasn't bad looking either.
Oh yeah, because you said she was in a soap.
And they used that actually as a little bit of a dark comedy thing in that episode, because to the two detectives they didn't know exactly what she looked like, so we had all these different sort of similar looking white girls go by that they were trying to figure out which one was her.
Oh yeah, I remember that bit. Yeah.
But yeah, this one was that the one where this is where Stivers was all up in Ballard's business about Falzone, I think.
Yeah, I remember this. You and Morgan didn't like that about Stivers.
Well, yeah. Morgan feels even stronger about than I did. He never liked Stivers because, see, that goes back to, talk about like the grudge holding. He's does that much more than I do, because he basically feels like she was responsible for taking down Kellerman, so he doesn't forgive her for that.
Kellerman was the SDP, right?
Yeah. So he's always angry at Stivers for being the one that sold out Kellerman.
Yeah, but it's just a TV show, though.
well, so some people have very strong identify with the type so thoroughly.
To make a connection in my mind here, as we said earlier, connecting things. Why I said the questions on that human metrics test were so bad is that one of them was trying to determine between T and F, asked about, do you get involved in TV soaps? And I was like, it's not an FT thing, and you can tell that from what just happened, what I just mentioned about Morgan getting involved in despising characters on both soaps and other shows based on those things. So you can there's the girl I was talking about that was cute, the one in the previous picture. But anyway, not her, but the previous one. She's another lesbian. This one looked like Dee Dee Myers. Yeah, her. Anyway. Yeah, it's not an FT thing to get involved in the characters. It's either one can do that.
Yeah, it's probably because most of the SDPs that you see on television are a-holes and scrubs, as Morgan would call them, rather than accomplished people.
Yeah,
Right.
when he talks about how the ESTP is never the hero, they always make. I always point out Indiana Jones, but it is kind of sad that that's really the only one I can think of.
Indiana Jones
So,
is an STP? You sure?
Oh yeah.
College
Oh, yeah.
professor?
Oh yeah.
See, I can see ISTP, but ESTP?
Yeah, he's an ESTP for sure.
Ooh, controversy.
Yeah, the best way to figure that out is to contrast him with one of Harrison Ford's other most famous characters, Han Solo, who is an ISTP, and look at the differences between Han Solo and Indiana Jones, and most of them are a difference of introversion and extroversion, if you look at it. But anyway, well, that's a whole other video. But anyway, it is kind of sad that that's the only character I can immediately point to and say, well, it's an ESTP hero.
Yeah,
I'm sure there are some other ones, but that's, you know.
But he's afraid of snakes, though. Morgan would probably bite the head off it and eat it.
A specific fear of something does not make you an introvert.
Yeah, but you do lose ESTP points, though.
Maybe in your mind.
Yeah, in my stereotypical view
Yeah.
of them, yes.
I mean, yeah, that's not a disqualifier in any way.
I know.
So anyway, we have to move on, or we're not going to get through this. So anyway, as far as the Law and Order side of things, I gave it a 7. Ben gave it 7.5. Bradley said 8, for an average of around 7. And then for the Homicide part, I said 7. Ben said 7. Bradley said 7.5. So about a 7 for that one too. So then we move on to the next Homicide episode, which was episode 16, entitled "Truth Will Out." And as I said at the time, if Homicide.com is not the worst, then this one was. But I think this was just second worst. And it's written by Noel Bain, Anya Epstein, and directed by Keith Samples. A woman comes to Falzone and asks him to reopen the case of her younger brother's 1972 death, an accident she caused, according to her mother. The case stirs up painful memories for G, who had been its primary, and he, Falzone, and Stivers eventually learn the truth. The mother battered the boy to death and blamed her daughter. And see, that right there is part of the problem I have with it, is that they don't actually for sure learn the truth, because they don't actually in any way prove that. They just assume it, and they never have her actually confess to it. So they just have her do what she says implies that's probably what happened. So anyway, Bayless faces widespread ridicule and criticism within the department after word spreads about his personal website, which includes his musings on sexual and spiritual matters. Warned by G that it may jeopardize his career, and reeling from his sudden rejection by a sergeant trying to stay in the closet, he decides to shut the site down. Falzone and Ballard reconsider their secret relationship after Stivers spots them together at dinner. So, yeah, there was all kinds of annoying things in this episode. It was another really dark one, and we didn't really have anything that kind of brought it out of that, because everybody was going through something where it was just the bad side of all of them, it seemed like to me. So that was why it was tough to enjoy it. I still did enough that it's, again, I don't call it a bad episode, but it's certainly not one that I want to watch on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Again, it still has strong performances, as always.
Hers as well.
Yeah, I mean, she was great in terms of what they gave her to do. That was another thing I thought was a little bit cliche Hollywood, having this scene where G, the original primary, is the one that pushes her to this confession that's not really a confession. And they just go to, they cut to basically saying, that it's solved now. And I would have liked it better if she stuck to her guns and didn't admit anything. That would have made it Ben's 2 points for the Miami breast implants. I would have given it 2 points for actually having the guts to not have that happen at the end, of having it still be up in the air. Because that was why the one about Case or Do or Die was better, is because they were willing to do that. And this one, it was like they needed to have a pat ending, and it just didn't work for me.
It was almost like this showed a lot of the examples of what people complain about American drama series. So it's almost like...
Yeah, it was a little bit over the top. And just a little bit too much to go, okay, we're going to have the dramatic scene to clinch this. And so much of the previous Homicide episodes, they've been able to do that without it feeling forced at all. And this did feel forced, so that's why I didn't like it as much. I mean, you think about an episode like 3 Men and Adina, and I know that's like a high standard to meet for your whole show, but it's so much better in having an intense scene an interrogation scene where you keep on being right there at the brink of getting this confession, and you're just living and dying with the detectives as they go through this scene, and you contrast that with this, and it's just not at that level.
And you could turn that into a stage play, that Three Men and a Dina.
Oh sure, yeah.
Especially if you could, I mean, they could have done that at the time. The problem is the original actor was so good who played that guy. So the way they wrote it, and the way that like I said before, a continuing theme with me is when it's a box scene and Frank has somebody to go up against who is his intellectual equal, at least in terms of tactics, then that's always makes him better.
All right. Well, I'm gonna hope that Bradley has something to say about this episode, because I'm gonna let him do that while I get some water, and I'll be right back.
Okay, go on, bud. Okay. Save the day.
Yeah, I mean, nothing that hasn't already been said comes to mind. Like, I think that the worst part about it was the sudden. She talks about the sensationalism of G somehow miraculously having the insight of having the whole episode. He was sort of he had a suspicion. And it was given to us that he had the suspicion, but it wasn't exactly elaborated on what the suspicion was. It's just he thought that he, quote, missed something, and he just suspected that it was the mother, and that was it. We weren't giving anything else. It's just that, I was distracted before, but now I'm not distracted. I suspect you. And that was the end. So I thought that was a bit that might have deified G a bit too much of having the detective who has a hunch and sort of isn't able to supply any evidence to support the hunch.
It was like
he just has it.
It was like somebody sent the wrong script in. It's like they sent the script into a series that was all like what you would claim about an American formulaic show, and all this. It's like a show it's like a script from a different show. It's not. It's out of keeping with what Homicide, or maybe as if they brought in a writer. It's not good Homicide. It's still a good episode.
I agree. Like it seems like one of the shows where they have like a superhero detective who sort of has all the answers and knows everything. And in the context of a Homicide episode, it's like they forgot to finish it. It's like they forgot to finish the ending. You just completed an incomplete script.
Yeah, I think I said at the time that it would have been a typical Matlock episode, except that Matlock would have gotten the woman to admit it on the stand. So. Anyway.
Yeah, contrived. That's the word they use, isn't it? Contrived. Yeah.
Yeah. The ratings, I gave it a 5. Ben gave it a 5. Bradley said 6.5. So about 5.5 average. And Ben has already moved on picture-wise to the next one, so we'll go ahead and talk about episode 17, which was called Zen and the Art of Murder, by Tom Fontana, Julie Martin, and Lloyd Ross, and directed by Miguel Arteta. And in this one, Munch and Lewis are called to the scene of a Buddhist monk beaten to death in his own temple. G puts Bayless on the case, or at least to help Munch, causing Munch to pull out of it in frustration. And the detectives learn of tensions among the temple monks and the victim's own unwholesome secrets. The case leads Bayless to a homeless man who admits to the killing, then shoots at him. Bayless kills the man in self-defense, feeling that his Buddhist beliefs are shattered. Gardy and Ballard take a sidewalk shooting with 3 eyewitnesses, but the case slowly falls apart as the identifications prove unreliable. Falzone and their secret relations. So, yeah, we had, I think, a good use in this episode of the 2 different cases going, and they were very different, but there was similar themes across them in terms of that there was the point that was kind of made back in the book about the difficulty of making a case based on witness statements, because you have so many people that contradict each other. And you had that in this, where they had the 3 witnesses and they all told different stories, but were all sure of what they saw. And the mother or the aunt basically admits that she was going off what her daughter or niece or whatever it was said, and didn't really see the guy very well at all. And of course, they basically show us. Honestly, there's another one where I could have given him more points, but at the end they kind of basically reveal that the guy really was the suspect really was the murderer, because they have him throwing the gun away, and I would have probably taken that part. I like it, but I guess they were kind of trying to make the point in that they wanted the audience to know he really did it, because they were trying to say, here's a case where we're going to frustrate you by showing you that he did do it, but nobody can convict him because they can't get enough evidence on him. And of course, the Bayless stuff, I really actually liked the Bayless parts better, because it really was sort of like this was the not antithesis, that's not the right word, but the yin and yang. I guess this was the yang to the previous week's yin, when it came to like Bayless was at his low point
Zenith,
in terms of feeling like all these things were falling apart, and in this he sort of in a way like came to that for lack of a better term, he like realized he's a guardian instead of an idealist. It was sort of like he had that reality check where he's like, I'm not committed to this, this particular kind of spirituality as this intense belief. I'm like, this is what I kind of wanted to do because I felt like I was having this midlife crisis. But this is sort of hitting home that who I am is more defined, well, the way a guardian tends to define themselves, more based on the job, the family, the community, that sort of thing, as opposed to these other kind of beliefs. And that was sort of what. So I really kind of liked that aspect. I wish they had left that aspect alone further on, but that's a whole nother topic. But anyway, that part, as it was in this episode, I thought was really good.
And I think we said at the time that because that was sort of coming into vogue, it was almost from a guardian point of view. Oh, well, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, like, because it was almost as if the Buddhist thing was becoming the new normal. And so he went towards that because, well, this is what you do. You go spiritual and try and re-examine yourself, because that's what people do.
Yeah, and I like that it wasn't just about that he had shot the guy, but also the previous stuff about how the monk was not exactly the most appropriate in his actions, having had sexual relationships with
ENFJ monk,
whatever they call him. But that also that they had the scene where that they had forgiven him, or even the spouse of the
I remember that.
Forgiven him. So there was a lot of elements again that reminded us, and I thought a really good performance by him as the homeless guy. Once again, going blank on his name, but because I think of his character like to live. Anyway, yeah, I thought he was great. Again, another typical Homicide thing where he says he killed him over giving him a spoon because he was like, I'm not, I can get that for myself, so he was asserting his independence, and it had nothing to do with the Buddhist beliefs or anything. All of that was, again, just in terms of them actually finding the killer. Thing that kind of irked Bayless, because I think he was looking for it to happen, so it was.
But I actually thought that was very real, though, the psychology of the guy. And that came across as real, very much real.
Yeah, so I thought, this was one of those episodes where characters almost gave not that the regulars, which is why so the game was really.
Bradley, is Jeff's sound going for you as well?
Yeah, it's doing it again.
Right. So if you tell us
in the world, and he was if in the very last episode there was a confrontation between Lewis and Bayless where they almost sort of came to blows almost, and so this was kind of a contrast to that, in being that Lewis was the one reassuring Bayless that he was in fact a good cop.
Yeah,
what did they come over to? What was the exact point that they almost came to blows over?
Well, I mean, we'll get to that in the final episode, but that
right, okay.
It was about what Bayless was doing with the Luke Ryland case, and how Lewis was saying he gets too emotionally involved in the case. He can't let it go because of what happened with Adina Watson and everything.
I remember that, and then yeah, we'll get to it when we come to it. And then Danvers said something out of character, although it was built up with presaged with always hardly got any sleep and all, because there was all this stuff about going to the wrong case and not dealing with it in a timely manner, and then the case being dismissed. Right, so we'll go to the next one then.
Yeah, so Bradley, you said you did not see this one, right?
Oh, right, I never saw it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So in that case, obviously it's an average of 8 because we both gave it an 8. So the next one, Bradley was not present for the hangout, but I think he said he did see the episode, and that was Self-Defense, episode 18, written by David Simon, Eric Vermeyer, and Yaphet Kotto, Barbara Koppel. And Falzone and Stivers take the case of a man's own bed. His ex-wife and assistant him, but claims that she is due to battered woman syndrome. In the case, over G's objections, and he and the detectives uncover evidence that suggests an intent to commit murder. G's chances for prize when he fails to persuade the presiding judge not to send the case to trial. Lewis reveals a bias against partnering with women as he ditches Ballard on a series of bar robberies that leave one man and the perpetrator dead. Falzone realizes that he still has feelings for Ballard, and Gardy idly proposes marriage to Billy Lou while drinking all day at the waterfront, and finds out that she and Munch are already engaged. So, thoughts on this one?
I remember I saw it, but for some reason I'm not remembering it very well. Maybe you should start, Ben.
I think yet again it was very good acting from the guy playing Garty, and it was a good scene between when he found out about Billy Lou being engaged to Munch, and just looking through this to remember elements of it. I think maybe it might have been a bit of a downer storyline with the battered one. Oh yeah, that was that bit with Lewis going a bit street there. I always give that as an example of, even though he's an introvert, he's better able to communicate with people, the people of Baltimore, or in that particular strata of society, because Lewis came from that lower working class background, so he can speak in that way, so he can communicate with them. So I remember that bit. Yeah, this is that scene there. It's all a bit vague. Just looking through the episodes. Oh, right. Well, was she a high-flying lawyer? I think she was a high-flying lawyer, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And this is that thing where I think we came to the conclusion that we thought she was a bit arrogant. And that, of course, people can do that in real life. Make silly mistakes.
Yeah. She was confident she wasn't going to be convicted, that her defense would work. So
yeah, this was the one with the policy, wasn't it? And then they found out. Then they had the recording of didn't she inquire about what she would get?
Right.
Oh, the. Oh yeah, and she'd already broken up with the guy. So basically, she took a policy out on the guy that she killed.
Yep.
Oh yes, and then they had this thing about. Well, of course we're not going to pay out in that situation, and then unless So what did she actually? Did she actually check that up though? I think that was a plot point that she actually. What did she actually ask them?
Ask who?
You know, in the phone call when she apparently.
She asked if she would collect on the insurance policy if she was found, if he was killed, but in self-defense.
Right. Given that she's such a high-flying lawyer, she might already know that and know that conversations can be tapped and listened to. So maybe if you look in the law books, that might be a better way to go.
Well, and like I said at the time, I think that as far as the character was, she had made up her mind she was going to do this, and she thought that with that defense she would win. So she thought she had enough friends in high places,
Yeah,
including possibly judges, that she didn't think it would be a problem, that would never come up.
and
it almost didn't, because as it came down to the prosecuting attorney agreed with the defense attorney, like they had an agreement, and it was only the judge deciding not to accept it that moved it on. So if they'd gotten a different judge, she might have gotten exactly what she wanted.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually not remembering this. It's like I remember parts of it, but maybe didn't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of details, quite a lot of procedural details in it.
Mm. No, I don't know why I don't remember it.
Of all of these, because there's quite a lot of slides in this episode. I don't know if I've cycled through, or I don't know if it has cycled through all the slides because I've got it on automatic slide change on. Yeah, I think this is changing.
Maybe I haven't seen the whole episode.
There was sometimes you said, Bradley, oh, you've watched it on double speed. There was one time when you watched an episode and you watched it on double speed.
That was just once I did that, though.
That was funny, though.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was the thing I remember about this episode, that I made her the thumbnail.
The records woman?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the thumbnail, that slide.
Yeah. Sometimes, like the way you did the split screen on the Miami one, like that one, I think worked pretty well. But having her as the thumbnail on this one, that's a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, that's just,
the duck pin bowling thing, I did mention that before. That it was Falzone actually got a little bit jealous that she went and did that with the medical examiner guy, even though it wasn't really a date. She was just part of his team.
Yeah, I mean, and it was well played where you thought that, just a little bit of an inkling of that you might have clenched his fist. With the thought of, but yeah, that was well played for showing that there were feelings still there. And it was nice to see Shino again.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of those kind of details is what has made the episode for me, because I wasn't quite as fascinated by the elements of the self-defense part as Ben was. So I gave it a 7 and Ben gave it an 8. And Bradley wasn't there for that hangout, so but this guy was good to play the judge. I thought he gave a good case for when he talked about how the conservatives liked him when he was putting gang members in jail, but then when he didn't when he followed the same standard for a white woman attorney, then they were on him about that. So.
Yeah, and that was a really good scene with those two. It's sort of like two professional SJs, and they could sort of talk about similar experiences of coming through, their background and having to win respect.
Yeah.
So that was good, and he was a good actor as well.
Yeah. All right. So we move on to episode 19, which was, I can say, was the unique episode of the season. I always have to stop myself from saying most unique because I know grammatically that's not correct. But
very good, Jeff. And
Identity Crisis is the name of it, and that was written by Tom Fontana, Eric Overmyer, and Willie Real, and directed by Joe Berlinger. Falzone and Lewis are called to the scene of a man shot to death. I'm reading the wrong description. I was going by the Wikipedia, which lists them in broadcast order. So I was right about the first thing I said, which was the unique episode, but the title was actually Lines of Fire. And it's Tom Fontana, James Yoshimura, and Catherine Bigelow. So anyway, a man takes his 2 children, son and stepdaughter, hostage, shoots and wounds a cop when the quick response team arrives, and then demands to negotiate only with Mike Giardello. Mike learns that the man has acted out of desperation over being laid off and his wife leaving him. When his wife breaks through the police line, he shoots wildly out the window and kills her, a fact that Mike works desperately to hide from him. The man offers to trade his gun for a pizza, but breaks the deal and lets his stepdaughter go before killing his son and himself too quickly for the QRT to react. Mike berates himself for missing a chance to save both children, even if it would have led to the man being killed by the QRT. And when I saw this again, it was one of those I found myself saying, I wouldn't have been surprised if Ben also gave this one a 2 or whatever for the not being able to watch the the scene with the child being killed, and that there was a very dark ending, very bleak ending, and so but he actually didn't. He gave it a 7, so he was able to see past those aspects and enjoy what was good about it. I think the thing that kept me from liking this better, because I kind of wanted to, because there were a lot of aspects I liked about it, but there were 2 main things that stopped me. One, Ron Elder, who played the main guy who took the hostages, I thought he could have been a little bit better. And again, I hesitate to say it because I'm not saying he was a bad actor. Morgan jumped on me and said I called him a bad actor, but I really didn't. I just said that there was just something slightly off about the performance, that he didn't. I guess we've seen so many great examples on Homicide of characters that could have carried that show that he didn't quite pull it off for me. And so that's why I ended up giving a 7 and not a higher score, because I thought they did a really good job of the plotting, the pacing, everything, the way they set it up, including not copping out by having everybody survive in the end like some shows would have done. But there was a little bit missing from his performance, I think. And the other thing is, again, the choice of characters to use for it, having Mike be the main cop involved, made it not as strong as if they had made it somebody like Lewis or even Munch. We talked about how the episode would have been different if Munch had to go through that same situation. There were ways to make it more compelling than it was, but I can't say again that it was bad anyway. It was just it was one of those, what was good enough and intense enough that I found the things that I could have changed about it that would have made it even better. Put it that way.
Yeah, and I thought the acting was good from the guy playing Michael Giardello. But yeah, it would have been even better if it was Munch, because I think what we all want is Munch to be put in situations that is outside of his comfort zone, and that is an emotional situation, because Munch doesn't like to show emotion, and so we want to see him a bit uncomfortable and show some emotion. Oh yeah, so I'll tell the audience, QRT is Quick Response Team. I thought the guy was okay, him playing him. He's obviously he's not in the great league, but good enough. It's just there's a high standard set by Homicide.
Yeah, well, that's why I wasn't really criticizing his acting. Even I almost think maybe directing wise, like I would have made a few different suggestions to him or something. I don't even know exactly what to say about that, but I just felt like it was just, I don't know, something about the way he said things. Like I would have had him just deliver things a little bit differently.
Right.
It's hard to describe exactly what I mean. It's just sort of a feeling I had that was just slightly off.
Right. What I would say is that I think the character was a little bit off as well, in that you're showing somebody who was a little bit paranoid. And yeah, it's very subjective. What do you think, Bradley, of the acting of that guy, the hostage taker?
I thought the acting was fine. I thought the character might have been more questionable than the actual acting, but I thought the acting was fine. The whole context of the meltdown and him being him losing his job, I felt like there was something missing. I felt like that had to include more misfortune for him to be driven to that point of holding, shooting. Well, he shot an officer before the detectives arrived, right? So he'd already fired the gun.
I think what was good in showing the wife what the wife is like, that the wife was always nagging at him and putting him down. And he was somebody who had skills, but he wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. And so you could see as somebody who was insecure about him, and his wife's always nagging at him. And so I thought she acted well, the actress playing his wife.
I think she actually might have been the best of the guests in this one. I thought it was really realistic, the way that she was portrayed. And I remember, two things. One, I remember saying at the time that I was a little bit let down because it never really followed up on this episode after it happened. It was very self-contained, so you didn't see any fallout for what happened with the deaths and how I feel like that there would have been some ramifications. Somebody would have lost their job or at least been suspended over what happened, because basically the hostage team turns it over to somebody who's an FBI guy. It seemed like they didn't follow protocol for sure. And the other thing is, I remember Bradley saying that he had seen too many hostage-taking episodes of things, and so it was like part of that is it was not a new concept in any way, so he was like had kind of oh no, not another hostage episode kind of feeling about it. So.
Yeah, I think I remember Ben saying something similar as well.
Yeah, I think it was like we've seen a lot of them, but I thought it was quite well done for that, because what I liked was concentrating on the character of that guy and seeing how he could got himself in that position, and he was aware at least of he's got himself in a position where he can't really go back, and just sort of like the mental breakdown of the guy, and he knows that he's in a bad situation here and it's not going to end well. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off earlier, buddy. You're going to finish your thought before I came in and.
I think I pretty much finished it. Yeah, so I don't want to.
No, I forgot what I was going to say. I had something and then I turned away and forgot about it. But I hate to keep going back to comparing it to 3 Minute Dina, but I do remember I did that because it was similar in the sense that they had a whole episode basically set in one room for the most part, and so I sort of did compare the two in terms of it was like this harrowing kind of experience where you're, it's about this intense, it's almost real time in terms of how things take place. And when you do that, of course, in anything, then you can have both sides. You can ramp up the suspense, or you can make it boring because you can kind of feel like, well, when is this going to end? And I didn't have that feeling like, that it was too long or anything. It felt like as far as the timing of it, the pacing of it, it was really well done. And I even liked the fact that they end without any kind of scene where Mike is like reflecting on anything. He basically has no time to do that. It's just him leaving kind of with his thoughts about what happened, which is, like I said, why I wish there had been some follow-up where he discussed how he was affected by it, or anything was affected by it. As it is, it's like this happens and it almost might as well have been a dream because there's no effect on anything else. So that's why it seems very self-contained, which is why they ran it out of order because there wasn't anything that would mess up the continuity of any of the other episodes.
Mm.
So I gave it a 7. Ben gave it an 8. Bradley gave it a 7. So average of about 7.5.
Yeah. So I think the negative points that we give it is mainly the thing is they should have been another episode, at least where it's referred to the effect.
Should have been some follow-up, and I would have liked to have different characters as the main ones involved.
Yeah, Munch.
So we move on to episode 20, the Y chromosome. And that one was written by Anya Epstein and directed by Kyle Secor, who, if you don't remember, is the guy who played. Ballard and Shepard team up on the shooting death of a teenage girl outside of high school. The victim had been a member of a gang introduced into it by her older sister. and had sex with a rival gang member before her death. Shepard suspects his girlfriend, but the detectives find her dead before they can arrest her. They then take the older sister into custody, believing that she acted out of revenge. Billy Lou asks Munch to talk to her neighbor's abusive ex-boyfriend, who later storms into the waterfront and slams her head on the bar. She decides to postpone their wedding, leaving Munch frustrated because the two have promised to abstain from sex until their wedding night. So this one was a little bit of a downer to me, especially, in between better episodes or more intense episodes, that it seemed like this one just didn't have the, compelling elements, I guess is the best way to put it, as some of the other ones did. But, and they kind of acted like the female gang member thing was something brand new. And I guess maybe that was one of those times I had a hard time putting myself back in the context of late 90s, that maybe that was seen as a lot less common then. And I guess now it doesn't seem as much that way. So maybe it was a little bit harder to get into that aspect of it. I thought some of the guest actors that, some of the other people involved in like the gang and stuff were pretty good. They did a, realistic job of like messing with the cops and, kind of the different dynamics of what was going on between the different groups and those things to it. And of course the show didn't make a big deal, but kind of had a brief thing about, everybody kind of making a joke about the two female detectives working together, like there was going to be something bad happen with that, and so there's a little bit of discussion of those aspects. So it was a very female-centered episode, and so a little bit of, maybe you could say, a bold choice of them to do that, where there might have been some people kind of tuning out from it because of that aspect, not to be a female-focused episode, but not focused on, a bunch of sexuality or something to try to increase male audience. It was more focused on aspects that weren't, salacious or whatever. That's probably not the right word, but you know what I'm saying.
That's the right word, yeah.
Yeah. So it was more serious, but dealt with, kind of issues of females existing in a male universe, if you want to call it that. In some ways.
I think it's just a couple of the conversations between Ballard and Shepard were a bit heavy-handed, but I really like the acting and the way the characters were drawn for the female black gang members, especially the performance of the woman who comes in and she's acting really tough. But you can see that, the character's acting. Well, you know what I mean? She's acting the character, and the character's acting tough, and she's trying to hide her emotions, but it really does affect her. And then there's and I think, did she have another gang member killed? I think that's what happened in the storyline. Is that wrong?
I think person, I think it was a revenge killing. I think the person who was the corpse at the beginning killed someone, and then they dressed up as someone else and then killed.
Yeah, she dressed up as a male, member of the other gang. So they were trying to frame him from the start, but they made the mistake of taking pictures because they were so proud of their makeup job and making her into a male.
I remember this tall guy. Look at the size of his shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked the other guy. Now I forget what his name was, but the guy who came in that was kind of hitting on Shepard and said something about liking it rough or something when she cuffed him. I mean,
yeah, great acting. I thought that was good acting from that guy, and
yeah,
where their casting director, I always praise their casting director. Yeah, these are a couple of SPs, or at least two people using tactics, messing with the cops.
Yeah. So that was another element to, do they take them less seriously because they're female detectives? They even made comments about, like, when they came in, just kind of, even the girls that are the girl gang members are having, like, a little bit of less respect for the female cops. So it was a recurring theme. And, of course, this guy, Munch decides to mess with and makes things difficult for him.
Well, suppose the female gang members are they're sort of used to judging people based on their strength.
Yeah.
So,
and to a certain extent, you can make the case that in their position, they're somewhat of posing, and so they're kind of viewing the female cops doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, like you're posing in your position, so why are you judging us for doing the same thing? Kind of attitude.
And it's what you said before. I don't know if you said it on air, Jeff, where you talked about if somebody's cocky but they can do it, then it's not cocky to them because it's
Well, yeah, when she shows the scars and stuff and talks about how she burned herself or cut herself on purpose to prove her toughness and stuff like that, and that her father beat her on her too, and so she's basically saying like there isn't any of these things that that you're trying to think is beyond my capability.
So it might be a result of that similar thing that Lewis drew attention to Shepard being thin and light, and so the others might look at Ballard as short, and so it's plausible that they're judging people on how they carry themselves and their physical mass, things like that. Because and I think David Mark Kersey said that with the SPs, they want to see that somebody can do it, and until they prove they're tough, they're not going to think that they're tough.
Yeah.
And then I think, and then later in the scene where it's Ballard has to prove herself by slamming that guy down, is you remember when he said that he liked that?
Yeah.
All right. So, have all these slides been cycled through? Because some of them I did a lot of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add much to this, so
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you watch it, Bradley?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, he did. He actually gave it a 7.5, and Ben and I both gave it a 7, so a little over 7 average. So then we move on to Identity Crisis, which, as I mentioned, was aired out of order, which is why I started reading the description earlier. And that one is the one where Falzone and Lewis are called to the scene of a man shot to death in his backyard, his nose torn off and smoldering on his charcoal grill. Falzone suspects that one of the neighboring families is in witness protection, and Mike's inquiries reveal that the father is set to testify in a mob trial. However, those calls prompt the FBI to head off the detective's efforts to prosecute him for the murder, and Mike resigns in disgust over being betrayed by his superiors. A marathon autopsy section turns up an extra body in the morgue, and Bayless and Munch learn that the death occurred during a fight between two cousins over their uncle's watch. Ballard and Gardy investigate a bartender shot and killed during an armed robbery. A bank holdup soon afterward quickly leads them to the killer. After Ballard notices that Gardy is hungover, he decides to quit drinking for a month. So the first thing I would say about this is I remember from the review that the humorous thing is we all gave it the same score of 8. However, Ben and Bradley thought that the storyline with the witness protection and all that was the stronger of the two stories, whereas I liked the morgue mystery better than than the other one. So we had different things that appealed to us, because I thought that was a really good, darkly humorous story that I enjoyed, and I thought the other one was a little bit too cliched, whereas they didn't get quite as much enjoyment out of that one and enjoyed the other one better. So that was one note.
If I remember correctly, it's just you didn't really enjoy how Falzone was able to call everything about the everything about.
It was a little bit too easy for him in terms of all of those aspects to it. It's one thing to have kind of an intuition about it, but it's another thing to just even have everything down to the kid's name exactly right.
Was that the only thing you didn't enjoy about it, or were there other things? Or you might have enjoyed it, but is there any other reason you enjoyed it?
I still enjoyed it. It was just I just thought there was a little bit too much that was kind of too easy about that aspect of it.
Right.
But it was still, I still thought it was well done overall. I liked the scene of G kind of and Falzone kind of bonding over the Italian hand gestures thing, and some of those aspects of it. Again, we had the part about driving Mike to quit the FBI over those aspects of him being undercut by those things. I thought that part was good.
This actor here was good as well. This guy on the screen, and yeah, I loved all the stuff with the hand gestures.
Yeah, all of the. I mean, I thought all the guest characters again were really good performances, and again show their different aspects. They have this guy that, again as something I hate to keep using as a thing to say all these other shows, but it's true. Even a show I like NYPD Blue, there's so many times where they'd have characters where, okay, this character is sort of going to be a good guy, quote unquote. So they play up the elements of the that are positive about this character, and they don't really really show much of the flaws. Whereas I think Homicide almost sort of took the opposite approach, where they say, this guy is not the killer. How can we have him be a witness that annoys and irritates the detectives in a way where they don't like him, but they can't really do anything to him because he hasn't broken any laws and he's not the killer. He's just a guy that is going to annoy them because of the things that he says. So he's going to come off bigoted and uncooperative and whatever. But he's going to give them some information that may help them, but he's not going to be this likable character that everybody is like, oh, it's so good this guy came forward. He doesn't fill a static token kind of role in the story. He's a realistic character of this guy's perspective on what it's like to live in the neighborhood with these people.
Doesn't he say something that something about a nose being missing that implicates him as a suspect? It's like, no skin off my nose.
Yeah, right.
and the guy's nose was taken up.
Right. He tries to get him, think he's saying something because of that, and he didn't really, know anything about it. But yeah, he was complaining about the. He called the guy Smokey, and Lewis is like, you call him that because he's black, and it's like, no, because he always has that smoker going at all hours of the day. So.
Yeah. Yeah, this. Hold on. Yeah, the thing about this episode, because there's so much going on, there were like 3 different cases, right? The one with the morgue mystery, the witness protection, and then the one with I can't even remember. I think Ballard was on it. I just remember that Ballard was involved.
The guy that was dressing in women's clothing to rob places.
Right. Yeah, that. So.
And it was another case of a stupid criminal that because he used something that had his actual name on it to try to take the money out of the bank.
Yeah, I think I might have touched on this the first time around, but I sort of enjoyed the. I mean, I enjoyed that there's so much going on, but I think that there was some depth of sacrifice in order to have 3 different cases going on. So I think it was a thing that was like both a plus and a minus, is that you get to see so many people being active in so many different investigations, but the stupid criminals being stupid was really driven home because partly because I guess it couldn't really afford to do like a super deep dive in any one of the cases, but I think it is definitely is more realistic that most criminals are just dumb, and they're not all criminal masses or anything like that.
And that's something that if the show had continued longer, they might have been like make one of these cases kind of stretch into another episode like they did back in season 6 with my favorite episode of season 6 was one called Shaggy Dog City Goat, where they had the city goats, where the title came from, about like the hillbilly dudes that came into town, and they chased him around, but then they got away, and then they finally caught him in a future episode. So something like that could have they could have had, maybe the bank robber was somebody they had to follow into future things, or maybe the other mystery. But I still like the aspect of when he asked the question about how the country dudes got this expensive watch, and he asked them to find out, and you don't ever know if they did because they don't reveal that to us. So they kind of tease the audience with that.
I thought that was good because I like it when they respect the audience's intelligence, because they know the audience, that some of the audience, a fair percentage of the audience would be asking that question. How did he get a Rolex? So at least they acknowledge that the audience has seen that.
Yeah.
So I think there was once a line in Doctor Who magazine, respects the audience's intelligence more than reality, something like that.
Yeah, and I've said that sometimes about certain soap opera scenes where I don't know for sure if it was in the script or if it was an actor's ad lib, but somebody says something about how ridiculous the situation they're in is, and it's almost like a subtle kind of thing of saying, we know this is ridiculous, but we have to do it this way because it's a soap opera and we're supposed to, kind of thing.
Or Nicola Bryant saying, all these corridors look the same to me.
Yeah. So there's the little aspects like that where you can kind of have those little subtle things where they acknowledge to the audience that we know that,
We know that you know.
we're kind of criticizing ourselves in the way that you would be for the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that guy. I like the him as the chief ME, and at the risk of spoiling, because it is a very mild spoiler, but it doesn't give away any actual plot points of anything. I'll say that there's a great scene in Homicide, the movie, where the two chief medical examiner characters get to talk to each other. So I'll just say you can look forward to that because it's a good scene.
Thank you.
In the middle of a bunch of other stuff. And that scene is an example of what's great about Homicide. I'll just put it that way. There's plenty of other things I don't like in the movie that I'll point out after we watch it, but but that was one of the good ones.
Hopefully we can review that next week. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. No, almost could do two parts with that one too because it's longer, but I won't insist on it or anything. We can probably cover it in one. Anyway, anything else anybody wanted to say about Identity Crisis?
No, not here.
No.
All right, so eights across the board for that one. And then we came to the final regular episode of Homicide, episode 22, Forgive Us Our Trespasses, written by Tom Fontana and directed by Alan Taylor. Luke Ryland from the episode Homicide.com is set free on a technicality after several delays in his trial. Bayless flies into a rage and shoves Danvers down the courthouse steps, but later apologizes at G's urging. We'll say that doesn't happen until near the end of the episode. But anyway, Lewis and Falzone investigate a drug addict found stabbed to death in her home. After they arrest her husband, her sister, a Catholic nun, offers him her forgiveness. G's promotion comes through, but he turns it down because it will require him to transfer out of the homicide unit. Munch marries Billy Lou, but spends his wedding night at the waterfront after he is unable to consummate the marriage. Shortly after Ryland taunts Bayless with his plans to continue his murders in New Orleans, Bayless quietly packs his things and leaves the squad room without explanation. Lewis and Shepard respond to the call of a body in an alley. It is Ryland, shot and killed. As they begin to investigate, their conversation mirrors an exchange between Lewis and Cressetti in Gone for Good, the very first episode, ending with the same line, "That's what's wrong with this job. It ain't got nothing to do with life." So, I think what I did when I did the review originally, and I'll say it again, is that I think this episode is carried on two things. One, sort of the callbacks to some previous episodes, including the very first one, as well as a strong performance by Kyle Secor, I think possibly one of his best of the whole show, because it really pulls off the emotional wrangling that Bayless is going through from start to finish in terms of continuation of sort of that life crisis he's going through. And that this really, if there was sort of points in the past where it was like, okay, Bayless is affected by this, but then we'll get back to normal in the next episode. This one really establishes that he's been permanently changed by events that have occurred. And to hit that point home, of course, they show clips from the very first episode and his first day on Homicide, and a very rapid montage of a bunch of stuff that's happened to him since then. And so, anyway, just want to finish this one thing and say that that his performance, the callbacks to previous ones, and the fact that they have the basic case they cover in the episode is kind of a routine case and not like a huge deal, is kind of, I think, part of the point they were making, that we're not going out on this huge bang of some red ball case that everybody's crazy about. We're having something, the hit home again, the theme of the frustration of things don't go how we want them to go, and that most cases are routine. Most criminals are just stupid and they're caught fairly easily. And meanwhile, all this other kind of side stuff with family and relationships is going on. So it kind of hits all those little points along the way, which is why I think it was a really good episode and a good final episode. I'll put it that way.
So one of the bits there, folks, was the first episode. You've got Baylor surviving with his things, and then in the final episode, he leaves with his things.
Yeah.
So just the idea of full circle, and you know, things change, but things stay the same.
Yeah. Also, he doesn't tell anyone he's leaving. I think what G stops went away. I was be like, oh, and asked him if he's cleaning at his desk, or you know, cleaning like what, spring cleaning or something like that. Are you cleaning for the spring? And then Bayless is just like, yeah, I'm just cleaning out some stuff, and he's actually just cleaning out his entire desk. Good. So that was funny.
Yeah, and we had one previous scene in the previous season where he finally put away the picture of Adina Watson that he had kept on his desk since the very first case that he got. But I think in this one, it shows that he still had it. He just had it in his drawer, not on his desk. And so he puts that in the box, too.
Mm.
Well, this will go real quick if neither of you has anything else to say.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I think everything I said, I mean, this was the episode we last reviewed, so
right.
I don't really have anything to add to what I said. But I will say, I guess I will say again that, you know, I really enjoyed Bezos' performance, and the resolution of Lewis finally being able to come to terms with Shepard was, I guess, it finally came to a point where it's like, you know, it's the last episode. You should probably have them get this resolved, or you should sort of show that they're on the right path to being on good terms again. So, I
like her, the old lady right there.
yeah, that's funny.
Yep.
Acting like she had a shotgun she was going to blow him away with, and then.
Yeah, or even the initial interaction of her yelling to the Lewis and Falzone through the door. You know, it's sort of is she dead? Yes, she's dead. Okay, bye.
Yeah,
Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, lots of good dialogue there, and I like the bit where it looked like it was improvised, or one of those nice things that happens where it looked like the actor playing Lewis caught his coat on the railing, but they left it in because it's nice to keep those things in.
Yeah, and this scene that's up here and on the picture where was a little nod to Andre Braugher, because they asked him to come back for the final episode at the time, not knowing they were going to have a movie, and he declined, but they mentioned him anyway. So it's a little bit of a nod to, you know, having this conversation where, you know, at some point she says something like, "The great Frank Pimbleton, I'm not him," or whatever, and Bayless says, you know, something to the effect, I don't remember the exact words, but something to the effect that it was actually good that she wasn't, because they had a different kind of relationship.
Yeah,
and she says something like, "Yeah, you loved him, you know."
Yeah, he was your friend. Yeah, she said he was your friend, and then Bayless responded, "Yeah, he had no friends."
Yeah.
I mean, we went into that a bit about, say, you know, he just moved in different circles than most of the other detectives.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I can't obviously, so I don't know the character that well, so I can't, you know, agree or disagree with that. But I remember you talking that, which was interesting.
Well, yeah. Obviously, I'll reiterate, but I've said this many times, but you know, watch more of it because there's a lot of great stuff, and I think the only thing, you know, the thing that probably, and as we sort of transition into talking about season 7 in general, to wrap this up, that I would say that obviously the biggest missing thing from season 7 is that you don't have the Pimbleton-Bayless relationship. It's sort of, the absence of Pimbleton does kind of hang over season 7, but I will say the strength is that it takes several episodes to really sort of feel that way. I felt like they started off the season, you know, it takes a little time before that was the case, because we had some decently strong episodes at the beginning of the season, and I think overall I still think they did about as good a job as they could have done at not focusing on the fact that, you know, there some of the past actors and characters were gone, that they used who they had decently. I still think they could have given Munch a little bit more to do, and maybe some with Lewis, although he did get some time to shine in this, and so did Bayless. So I think maybe in some ways they actually did a better job of doing that in the final season than they did even in season 6. But there, I do feel like there was a very different feel, even from changing the squad room and the colors and the way they did the thing with the different interrogation rooms and stuff. So there was a definite different feel to the final season, but there was still a lot of positive.
They could have had a relationship between Lewis and Stivers, because that was hinted at early on when
I
Lewis was
guess
married.
they sort of they kind of dropped that, I guess. If anything, we go a whole other route with the psychology, because Ben likes to do this. Even when it comes to the typology people, because Stivers seemed to be most into him when she found out he was married, and then when his marriage kind of went, then it was like she seemed to lose interest.
Yeah.
So maybe she's got a thing for forbidden guys, and not for ones that are available.
And maybe she gets SP points there for liking a challenge.
And even the stuff where, if you take it a certain way, the scenes with her kind of trying to convince Ballard not to stay with Falzone, there's sort of a little bit of a hint in that Stivers is a little bit into Falzone too, and maybe she was trying to get him for herself. They never really follow up on that, but because they have the scene at the beginning when everybody was asking Shepard out, where Stivers and Ballard are sort of commiserating the fact that all the guys are into Shepard and not really thinking about them. And so I think I kind of got the vibe that Stivers were kind of hoping that, maybe Falzone would be into her also. So
this was Shepard's first and only season, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, cause I never saw the episodes where Shepard was being asked out. I only really
Yeah, that was the first episode of the season.
Yeah, it was a bit much.
Where they were really kind of trying to hit us over the head with, oh, look, she's attractive, everybody wants her.
Yeah, because the audience is blind.
Yeah, and
it's not a radio show.
And meanwhile, I was thinking, I think the other two are probably better looking than her, in my opinion. But maybe that's just my personal preferences. I like shorter women than anyway. But as far as the scores for Forgive Us Our Trespasses, I gave it a 10, and Ben an 8, and Bradley a 9 for an average of about 9. So if we add up all those and get a season average, I didn't get. I had this idea in my head. I was gonna look up what our season averages had been for all the previous seasons. But I didn't do that. I know that overall they were higher though. So this is the lowest season overall in terms of our ratings, but it still wasn't super low. My overall average for the season was a 7.73. Ben's was 7.41. And Bradley, with less episodes, his average was 7.71. But it's still, those are all pretty close together. And that makes a total of everybody's average of 7.62. So there's some numbers. But yeah, some of the previous seasons, the average was higher than 8. So obviously we, the overall quality, I think, did go down. But still a lot of enjoyable stuff throughout the season.
I remember that line from Lewis. With all due respect, the man was a piece of crap.
Yeah. So yeah, if there's any other favorite lines that pop up from the season, feel free to say them now or something. Forever hold your peace or whatever.
Well, not from this season. I just remember the line from the first episode. What was it? About the polystyrene coffin. And it says buried like a hamburger.
Yeah, you love that funeral guy. He was good. Yeah, there's like characters like that stick out. I guess thinking about this season, though, I guess I already sort of did give my overall thoughts. But if there's any other thing about, I guess if there's anything about any of the character storylines or their growth or anything like that you want to talk about or anything like that, then now's a good time to do that, I guess.
Well, I mean, we pretty much covered it with. I like the Lewis storyline. I was a bit disappointed that the Ballard and Falzone's storyline didn't really go anywhere because I liked it flirting between them.
They didn't even mention it really in the last couple of episodes. They just they needed partners for the last episode because the two partners were leaving, so that was the only mention of it and nothing else.
What we haven't talked much in this. I guess we did a little bit in part one, but thoughts on the G and Mike relationship and how that was done or changed over the season, or anything to say about that?
Well, I thought the actor himself got a lot better after his. I mean, he was okay in his first film. I just thought he was able to. Maybe it was the material, was able to show himself as a better actor after the first episode. I thought the relationship was pretty well drawn between father and son. It wasn't too cliched. It wasn't like Babylon 5 where John Sheridan was always going on about how great his dad was.
Yeah, he's very much his own person, which I really liked. His G is very much his own person, and they mostly had a respectful relationship, except for that one episode where G, directly defied a direct order.
There was a bit early on, I suppose it was slightly cliched, where he was talking about him, you thought more about your career rather than your children, things like that. But
yeah, I liked that element in terms of that what we had seen of G up to this point is you obviously saw he was dedicated to his job, and that we sort of established he had a little bit of a uncomfortable relationship with his kids in some ways. But I liked the fact that since you made one of his kids actually a regular character, you had an opportunity to sort of get their side of it, but also in a way it sort of humanized G a little bit more, and that we saw, it wasn't just a simple cliched case of the dad who's never home kind of thing. There was more to it than that, and I think, they maybe could have explored that more. When you think about an episode like Lines of Fire, where you had Mike as the featured character, but it was not anything to do with his father. Maybe they could have taken a little bit more time to develop that. But maybe, obviously, if they'd had more than one season of him on there, they would have done it. But maybe I think they were trying to, in the final season, do something to, I guess, give G something to do that wasn't just as a boss, how he is. They could have done, because it really had been a while since they explored anything about G's romantic life, or anything like that. They only sort of touched on it back in like season 3, and they really didn't have much about his personal life beyond that. So they maybe could have had a little bit more of that. Would have been interesting to explore. But again, obviously, you have limited time to do all these things.
I like how, and this is why I've paused it on here to remind myself that you've got Bayliss confronting Munch about the idea of maybe he killed Pratt, the guy that shot up his friend and 2 other officers.
And I love that we didn't have some scene where Munch admits he did it. That would have been a too cliched thing. I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah, but it was well played that it was sort of like open to that interpretation. And what also is open to the interpretation is maybe Bayliss did something as well.
Right. Yeah.
About what's he called? Ryland.
Ryland,
yeah. Which
I
is
mean,
why
they're heavily intimating that. Yeah.
Which is why I rated this episode, the final episode, so highly. And I'll just leave it at that.
Right.
I started to say something that was
okay. It comes to the TV movie. Okay.
But I will not do it because I'll wait until then to brutally respond.
Okay, fair enough. We are going to watch it, Jeff. We are going to watch the TV movie.
Yes, we will.
It's so great and so bad at the same time. It's going to be really hard for me to come up with a rating for that. I'm just going to say that in advance.
Right. Okay.
It's a lot of fun. It really is. I don't want to discourage anybody from watching it. It's for anybody who's a Homicide fan, especially who watched from the beginning. It's very enjoyable in a lot of ways.
I saw that Garty had a shamrock thing on his wall. Just needs to remind himself that he's Irish. American.
Yep. Well, I guess at this point, I'll just say, is there anything else anybody wants to say? But I guess, we bring up typology from time to time. Anything that stands out, anybody wants to say about any characters and their type or anything that
Yeah,
that came through in that
we
area?
could go through them all, like ones which
Really?
impressed. So we can
Okay.
say that
Very briefly, otherwise
very
we'll have to make
briefly.
this.
Yeah.
Well, we can say Frank Pembleton, ESFP. If we do the season 1 characters, Frank Pembleton,
Well,
ESFP.
of course, Bradley hadn't seen most of season 1, so we probably maybe do more of that in the
Right. Okay.
wrap up of the whole show.
Right.
But yeah, as far as the characters that's still around in this season,
Yep.
to me, I think I said this already in the previous season review, but the Lewis, when it came to when he got suspended from the force and kind of
Yep.
had his like personal crusade to bring down Luther Mahoney's people.
Yep.
That was sort of, to me, what was the ultimate convincing that he's an ISFP.
Yep.
Because I really thought that was kind of a real good example of that introverted feeling, dominant kind of behavior from him. And we saw it even earlier than that. Of course, back in season 2, he had the confrontation with Felton where he said the line about you go when it's your time to go and anything else is homicide. So he does draw those moral lines in the sand about what his moral code is, and this is how the way he sees it. So obviously a lot of examples, but I think that's why for season 1 through 7 all the way through, Lewis is my favorite character because I think he was very consistent in the way he was portrayed as an ISFP through the entire show, and you see different elements come out at different times. Sometimes they show more of his SP side, and sometimes a little bit more of the feeling side that comes out.
The way my memory works, I was going to call Bolander Bollinger.
Yeah,
and
well,
ISFJ, I think, for him. I think
did you
made
say F or ISTJ?
Oh, I said ISFJ. Are you saying ISTJ?
Yeah, for Bolander, I think ISTJ.
Okay.
Gardy and Bayless, I think, are both ISFJs.
That's fair enough. And you said that the reason why he said that was because of that key episode where he ended up looking after his uncle that had abused him, and only an ISFJ would do that.
There were a lot of elements along the way for Bayless. Obviously, he had a lot more episodes than Bolander or Gardy did. But I think that really was the clincher for me. Because originally at the very beginning of the show for Bayless, I was thinking maybe ISTJ for him too. But as the show went on, you saw that he made a lot more moral judgments, the way ISFJs tend to do. And when he had the abusive uncle that he goes back and realizes is disabled and can't take care of himself, and he starts helping him. That seemed like a so ISFJ thing to do. I've known ISFJs in my life that have had almost the exact same situation. They've had either abusive relatives or somebody who really treated them badly, and they still felt an obligation to take care of them when they couldn't because it was just that's family and that's what you do. It was this compelling thing for them, whereas a lot of other types of people would just be like, screw them, they ruined my life, I have no obligation to do anything for them. So,
and then there was that guy, I can't remember his name, the little fella with the camera, NF.
Brody,
that's it. And apparently he was chucked off the program because he was a bit of an SP in real life.
Well, the actor, got in legal trouble and stuff. Exactly how much that has to do with him being gone, I don't know. Because the only reason I even knew about that is because they mentioned it on one of the commentaries. So, and that person talking about it doesn't go into any details about it or anything. So.
And I just remembered the name, and also the name that's sometimes hard. Felton, ISTP. And he always likes his scenes with Frank, and he says, "What are you going to call it, Beaumont for, or Fremont?" That's it. And
I think I mentioned as we talked about that, ISTP versus ESFP. It's like the two sides of the SP coin. So you have, the same kind of relationship with like an ISFP and an ESTP. So you have, they're as far apart from each other as two SPs can be, but so they still relate on those core levels, but have very different ways of dealing with things.
Yeah, and so they've got different opposite interaction styles. One's extrovert, the other one's introvert, and one's directive, and the other one's informant.
Yeah, and of course we have ones we never had any disagreement on, like G is an ESTJ and Munch is an ENTP.
Yeah.
But I guess before we go out here, I guess for the characters that were introduced in the last couple seasons, I guess maybe your last chance to, if you have an opinion on on Ballard or I think I said Gardy, I think, is an ISFJ. And we kind of, I think, all agreed Falzone was ISTP.
Well, I would think Stivers could
Stivers.
most resemble ISFP.
That's kind of what I thought too on her. Yeah.
The other was, I would say that you can eliminate certain types for Ballard. I don't think she resembles ESTP.
Yeah. Again, it's tough. Like with Ballard, there were elements where she definitely seemed SP-ish, but then other times not as much. So it was kind of hard.
I think they tried to give Shepard some ESTP elements, but not quite. But they just tried to make her assertive, didn't they? But
yeah, she had some of the same, personality elements that Falzone did, in the sense that you can tell she had that, I need to prove myself to everybody kind of attitude about things. But again, she seemed to change a little bit, and I guess they could say the whole like beatdown thing was what changed her. But at the beginning, she seemed a little bit more laid back, where she got a little bit more intense later on.
did she show much emotion at any point in the season?
Not in any kind of like outburst kind of way. So, I think I said almost in a previous one that I think she might be a thinking type, just because it seemed like she was uncomfortable with her emotions.
Yeah.
She didn't seem to know very well how to express them.
I think it's possible that Ballard might be a feeling. I don't know. It's hard to say with her, because sometimes the quality of the actress comes through over the character.
Yeah, and again, at the beginning, I did discuss the slight behind-the-scenes thing, how when Ballard auditioned and they had her read Pembleton lines, so she asked them, basically, do you want me to be a female Pembleton? And they said, well, not really, but kind of. So it kind of does imply that maybe she was supposed to be an SFP in terms of her personality, but she's obviously very different from Pembleton, so she doesn't come off as being the exact same, but she's similar just in terms of she has almost sort of a separate, when she's really examining the facts of a case, she's very like focused on certain elements of the case, and to the extent she kind of has that same like put the blinders on and drive towards this one goal kind of thing in the moment as she's doing it. But then her other things in life are not as focused, and she even talks about her personal life being kind of haphazard and things like walking out on her own wedding and stuff like that, which sort of fits with that same kind of thing. Is that when Frank was in a position where he could be in his element, he was really focused and strong, and everybody pointed out how good he was as a detective, but his personal life was often kind of a mess because of those same elements, that he didn't know how to balance those things, and he didn't know how to sink himself into his personal life the way he did his work. So he kind of struggled in that area. And it may be that Ballard sort of had some of those same issues.
I think also there was a certain naive aspect to her, that it was almost as if, she comes from Seattle. She doesn't know what real crime is like. Like, I remember there was a bit of a storyline, I think it was in this City Goat one, it says, and it's like, and Garty's showing her, you've never seen white people live like this before, have you? Something like that.
Yeah, she was younger and less experienced, less worldly, I guess you could say, than Pembleton. So that was definitely a difference too. So.
It's just that generally SPs are more streetwise, and so maybe she lost some SP points because of that. But the naivety,
maybe a little, but I guess I think maybe with SFPs, there's maybe it's so much to do what it is they're focused on,
right?
That I've encountered plenty that would, and even myself, I could say some people might call me that in certain situations, and then other people would say exactly the opposite. They would say, "Oh, this guy's naive," or he doesn't know what's going on with any number of things, and they would probably be true. I admit that I'm ignorant to a whole lot of things, some of it by choice. That I just don't pay attention to things I don't care about. So, obviously, there's practical things if you're going to be on a certain job that you kind of need to know. If you're going to be a cop, you know, you need to learn the place that you're being a cop at. But she did come to Baltimore as a detective rather than a patrol cop, so she hasn't really learned the streets of Baltimore, you might say. She kind of depends on someone like Gardy to sort of school her on those things because he's been there so long. You know,
Yeah, we thought it might be some bias by the writers against Seattle.
maybe a little, maybe at least, or maybe just the image of Seattle in terms
Yeah,
of
because they've probably been watching Frasier.
yeah.
Too much.
In fact, they even had, you know, I think they dropped it pretty quick, but at the beginning they had Pimbleton calling her Seattle every time he talked about her, so it was trying to drive that home, remind everybody of that fact. So.
Yeah, I think they thought, oh, what is it? You got Microsoft there, and although that's
so, we kind of dominated that section. Bradley, did you have anything to say about anybody's types from what you observed?
I mean, I don't really have anything to add. I will say that I do tend to have, you know, I think I talked about this, but I tend to have some SJ biases when it comes to well, when it comes to like police shows in general. But I do think I generally put people in the SJ box until I can take them out of it. And I will say that obviously some of the like really strong like Munch is obviously not an SJ, and I think both Lewis and Falzone obviously SPs. And then for other people, it's less hard to take them out of that box. I think you can't really take out G. I think G is pretty obviously an SJ. Yeah, we talked about how Bayless tends to get whole NFE at some points. I remember when like one of the very first episodes I saw was him and Munch on a case, and I thought he really came off NF-ish. One of the conversations, it was like it must have been I'm trying to scroll through every character, and I'm just trying to think about one. So it was Munch and Bayless. So Munch must have been dragging Bayless into like an intuitive sort of space when he tends to have like a very sort of like NF-ish beliefs of like spirituality and like I guess universality, and he has all of these views, which of course any type can have, but I think those sorts of views are more typically ascribed to an S. I do think ISFJ is the best fit though, because I mean he does definitely go to the place of like in the one episode where he's forced to shut down his website. He's like, I never really wanted to. I want to express myself, but I really never wanted to challenge anyone or anything. I just felt like I wanted to, you know, express myself, and you know, I wasn't trying to like shake a mold or anything like that. So I think he could lose some. He might lose some NF points there, or at least some FI points. I do think he's probably SFJ though. He definitely fits the. In terms of like the Pemberton Lewis sort of emotionally demonstrative behavior, he just sort of fit more that mold.
Yeah, I remember a storyline where this neo-Nazi called Frank an N-worder, and he just kneed him in the head.
Really?
Yeah. It's an instant reaction, just kneed him in the head, because he was very close with Frank at the time.
Yeah, I also think the way he interacts with Pemberton, I haven't seen very much interactions with them too, but what little I've seen, sort of, they both definitely go to the feeling place very easily and quickly.
Because he's being manhandled by Bayless, and it says, "Don't let that N-worder touch me." So it just whacks him in the head with his knee.
Well, obviously I'm not talking about that because I haven't seen it, but in terms of like the first episode, how Bayless had like a problem with the method of sort of coerced. He sort of coerced confession. Oh no, he didn't read him his rights, something like that. I think he didn't read him his rights correctly, and Bayless took an issue with that, and you know, Pemberton had his Pemberton reaction. Do you think he did it? we both know he did it, so who cares?
Huh.
Sort of. I thought. Yeah, I thought that was. I mean, granted, any SJ could like say you broke the rules, but I definitely think that's more on the feeling side of that. Other who haven't been mentioned, like the whole Stivers, Shepherd and Ballad. I haven't seen enough of Ballad and Stivers to really know much about the like personality or personal lives. Shepherd. I do think she's a thinker. She's probably an ISTJ in my books.
ISTJ.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, she does do the SP thing of being she can go do that rash, impulsive behavior, but I think SJs can do that. Like I mean, Guardian Munch, he said Guardy was like getting ready to fight. Like the moment he came in to like the confront Munch, he was like, ready to fight. And the moment Munch had asked the question, he had to be held back.
I think STP for her, because there was a bit where she said she was friendly with and you could saw that she had some similar thinking with when he came back, Diamond. No, I forgot his name. The guy that played the ESTP guy, Reed Diamond, who played
Kellerman.
what was it? I forgot his name. Morgan won't be happy. I've forgotten the name. Kellerman.
Yeah,
Kellerman,
you said
that's it. And so she seemed to be, I think, a bit of an STP. But she's not as well drawn a character. But I would think STP.
I missed who we're talking about.
The Shepherd.
Oh, Shepherd. Okay.
But it's tricky though, because she's also trying to prove herself, and so that could just be.
I think one of the things that she could have been an SJ too. It's tough because you really don't get a whole lot of insight into her, so it's harder to.
Some kind of sensor, some kind of concrete type.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's pretty consistent. Is there's not a lot of intuitive characters, but so they stand out when we have them.
Oh yeah, there's just Russet, the little fella, Brody, and
Cressetti back at the beginning.
Yeah, maybe ENTJ.
Yeah. And of course Munch. And other than that, it's just guest characters like the friend of G that was the newspaper guy that got shot.
I think once time I may have described it, Homicide, something like really good, just full of sensing types, but a good portrayal of them, and that's most people.
Yeah.
And of course, if you write in a different situation, like say, what's that one called with the nerds?
Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, Big Bang Theory. Then most of those are going to be entities. I could describe them as that.
I'm glad you knew what he was talking about, because I would have sat here with no clue. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's forgotten the name a few times now, so I'm familiar that's what he's probably talking about.
Yeah, I was still thinking he was talking about a Homicide episode, so he lost me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I think mostly SJs.
Not many INFPs.
No INFPs. I mean, the autopsy guy could maybe be INTP.
I remembered one. We remembered one. Sorry for interrupting. There was that woman who liked it rough. We think maybe INFJ.
Now I know who you're talking about. Now, even in that vague description, you're talking about Emma Zool.
Yes.
She was in at least 2 episodes back in season 3. Both Bayless and Lewis had a thing for her, so they were kind of fighting over her. But yeah, she definitely seemed NF, and Ben thought NFJ because of the way she was. She wanted her partner to be aggressive. She broke up with Bayless because he was too gentle and not and wouldn't fight with her more.
So
I couldn't imagine an INFP saying that.
He gave us some SE points, but do you mean like physically fighting, or because there's a difference between
but it wasn't just physical. That was part of it, but it was like she wanted him to be more, directive with her, like stuff, you know, kind of be dominant with her, and he was hesitant to do that. So, but the thing is, he was, again, it showed kind of his SJ-ness, because he got tough with the other guy she had been with, you know, out of jealousy. Like, he was kind of trying to be tough with that guy, but with her, he wasn't like that. So it was like he didn't know, you know, to him it was like you're not that way with women, you're that way with men. So it was a very clear cut line in the sand for him. Whereas she was like turned on by the fact, you know, that he had been assertive, but she didn't want him to go after that guy. She wanted him to fight her.
Yeah, and so caregiver romance style, but of course with people, and even with the uncle, the people who are in need, still the caring side's going to come through with the protector, guardian.
Yeah, right.
But to the actual criminals, then, you know, it's going to come through with the attitude of the SJ as you're a criminal.
Because he's enacting discipline and order, you know.
And of course, that, just as Jeff said about for SPs being, it's still within the Guardian temperament. You know, ESTJ is not 1,000 miles away. It is the most opposite SJs, ISFJ and ESTJ, but it's still within the same temperament.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what else?
Well, I think we've gone quite a while, so
yeah,
you
it's been a while.
Maybe save some thoughts for the whole series wrap up video that we do. So.
Oh yes, good idea. Right then, so
we'll end it for season 7, and just say to join us next week when hopefully we will all be available to review Homicide the movie.
So goodbye for me, goodbye from the other Ben, and
yes, bye.
And just said bye already, and I'm gonna press stop.